that every part of our Labour movement is focused on getting us into power and making sure that that happens. So I don't know what the details of what the timing is, because I've been focused on this, so apologies for that.
Angela Rayner just fired a political missile straight at Keir Starmer, leaving the Labour Party in chaos. In a bold public showdown, she slammed his leadership and accused him of abandoning the working-class roots of Labour. With the party now split down the middle, you have to wonder, can Starmer survive this rebellion, or is his leadership about to collapse?
Labour will rebuild those foundations with an active centre of government. I've seen firsthand the difference that makes, and so has Keir. We grew up in different ends of the country and at different times. Not too different.
Angela Rayner didn't hold back when she publicly criticized Keir Starmer, making it clear that she's fed up with the way things are going under his leadership. During a series of interviews and speeches, Rayner made sharp, pointed attacks, painting a picture of a Labour Party that's lost touch with its working-class roots. You could almost feel the tension in the air as she went after Starmer, openly questioning his decisions and positioning herself as the real voice of Labour's traditional base.
And I think that's what the public expects of us. So, I'm focused on not just exposing what the government is doing wrong. I think what people often say to me, and if you don't look at my social media, it's a mixed bag most of the time.
One of the key moments of Rayner's attack was her outright condemnation of the cuts in corporation tax, inheritance tax, and capital gains tax. She argued that these policies, under Starmer's watch, made Labour look like it was siding with the rich, instead of standing up for everyday people. Rayner framed this as a betrayal of the working-class voters who have always relied on Labour to fight for their economic interests. She pointed out how unfair it seemed to offer tax breaks to the wealthy while communities were suffering under years of austerity. "You don't cut taxes when people need that money to survive," Rayner said bluntly, making it clear that she believes Starmer's approach has failed to deliver for those most in need.
Criticising the government all the time, what would you do? So I think part of what we've got to do now is not only show that the Labour Party has changed, but also set out what our programme for government is, and that's what I was doing today. So I'm not sure the details of the reshuffle, but I do know that what we have...
Rayner's blunt, straight-talking style is a big part of her appeal, especially with Labour's traditional base. She doesn't mince words or dance around issues. She gets straight to the point. This resonates with voters who feel let down by polished politicians who they see as being out of touch. Her working-class background and no-nonsense approach make her relatable to many who believe that Labour should be focusing on bread-and-butter issues, like jobs, wages, and public services. But here's the thing. This same style also puts her at odds with Starmer. While she's all about directness and standing up for the underdog, Starmer prefers a more measured, polished approach. He's trying to position Labour as a centrist party that can appeal to a wider audience, which means he often avoids taking such hardline stances. Rayner, however, wasn't having any of it. In one interview, she even called out what she sees as Labour's failure to back up its words with real action. "We keep telling people to tighten their belts, to live within their means, and now suddenly we can spend again? Where's the consistency in that?" she asked, with a hint of frustration in her voice. She made it clear that she doesn't just disagree with Starmer's policies. She's frustrated by the lack of direction and leadership in the party. For Rayner, it's not just about making promises, it's about following through. And in her view, Starmer has been too focused on political maneuvering and not enough on delivering real change for the people who need it most.
Is really interesting because she has her own mandate, so she's the elected deputy leader, so it's not like Keir Starmer can get rid of her despite him trying once. She was announced as the Levelling Up Secretary, and then they took that off her job title. She went back to being Housing Secretary. She hasn't got an office for Deputy Prime Minister.
Keir Starmer's response to Angela Rayner's sharp criticism was as cool and composed as you'd expect from someone in his position. He didn't lash out or show any visible signs of frustration, which seemed to be his way of projecting calm leadership under pressure. But there was something about his response that felt a bit too polished, almost like he was trying to sidestep the real issue rather than addressing it head-on. It was clear that Starmer wanted to avoid a full-blown confrontation especially with someone as vocal as Rayner, but his handling of the situation raised some eyebrows.
New Deal for working people, which I believe has been rebranded now as Labour's plan to make work pay, that has been carved off and sent into the Department for Business run by Johnny Reynolds.
Instead of directly engaging with Rayner's critique about tax cuts and Labour's drift away from its working class roots, Starmer attempted to shift the conversation toward safer ground. He steered the discussion toward policy areas like NHS funding and public spending, trying to remind everyone of Labour's broader agenda. It felt like a classic political move. When faced with uncomfortable questions, pivot to topics that play better with voters. But in doing so, he glossed over the core of Rayner's argument that Labour was losing touch with the people it was supposed to represent.
I mean, because obviously she sort of sees herself, and she is a link between, she's a link between the leadership and at times the Parliamentary Labour Party, at times the trade unions, and certainly, she personifies and embodies a large part of the Labour tradition. And
Where Starmer really got into hot water, though, was when questions came up about Rayner's own controversies, particularly around her second home and some of her legal issues. Instead of providing clear answers, Starmer was noticeably evasive. When asked if he was 100% confident that Rayner had done nothing wrong, Starmer's response was something along the lines of, "I'm very confident, but not quite 100% confident." It was one of those answers that left people wondering, wait, does he actually know what's going on, or is he just trying to dodge the question?
Position is absolutely fascinating, and I think it's going to be an ongoing story. But there was a good piece in Bloomberg this week about this fact that a lot of the sort of usual trappings of that office have not yet materialized.
This evasiveness didn't go unnoticed. Many people saw it as Starmer trying to play both sides, defending Rayner to maintain party unity while not committing fully to her defense in case more damaging details came out later. It's that kind of calculated response that makes people question whether Starmer's leadership is more about political survival than transparency. When journalists pressed him further on whether he had personally seen the legal reports related to Rayner's controversies, Starmer deflected, saying it wasn't appropriate for him to look into such matters. Again, it felt like another dodge, adding to the perception that he was trying to avoid deepening the rift within the party by staying vague. The public reaction to Starmer's responses was mixed, to say the least. For some, his calm demeanor was reassuring, especially in contrast to the more fiery and combative tone of Rayner's attacks. But for others, his failure to give direct answers came off as slippery, like he was more interested in keeping his leadership intact than addressing the real concerns being raised. This kind of political maneuvering is something that frustrates a lot of people, especially those who feel Labour's leadership should be more straightforward and clear about where they stand. At the heart of the clash between Angela Rayner and Keir Starmer is a deep ideological divide, and it's this conflict that's really tearing Labour in two. Rayner represents the Labour Party's traditional working-class base. She's vocal about her commitment to economic equality, fair taxation, and protecting workers' rights. For her, Labour should be standing up for the little guy, fighting back against austerity, and making sure that the wealthiest pay their fair share. She talks a lot about things like closing tax loopholes and investing in public services, and that kind of talk resonates with people who feel left behind by a system they think is rigged against them. Rayner's vision is straightforward. Labour needs to get back to its roots. She wants to see the party reconnect with the people it was built to represent, the working class communities that have long relied on Labour to stand up for their interests. In her speeches and interviews, she often points out that these are the very people who've borne the brunt of austerity, and she makes a passionate case for why Labour needs to be bolder in addressing economic inequality. Rayner is all about populism, in the sense that she speaks directly to the frustrations and anger of ordinary people. Her style is raw and unfiltered, and that's what makes her so popular among many Labour supporters who feel the party has drifted away from its core values. On the other side of this divide is Keir Starmer, who's taken Labour in a very different direction. Starmer's strategy has been more centrist, and it's clear he's trying to broaden Labour's appeal by shifting the party away from the more radical left-wing policies that define the Jeremy Corbyn era. Starmer wants to win over moderate voters, including those who may have voted Conservative in the past but are now disillusioned with the government. To do that, he's been careful to avoid the kind of bold, sweeping promises that might scare off middle-class voters. Instead, he's focused on pragmatism, emphasizing competence and moderation over radical change. The problem is, Starmer's centrist approach is at odds with the kind of populist working-class advocacy that Rayner stands for. While Rayner is calling for Labour to push hard on issues like fair taxation and workers' rights, Starmer is more cautious. He's trying to balance the need to keep Labour's traditional base happy while also appealing to voters who might not be on board with the more left-leaning policies of the past. In many ways, Starmer is playing it safe, but that cautiousness is exactly what's driving the wedge between him and Rayner. This divide isn't just about style, it's about what Labour stands for and where it's going. Rayner's populist approach, with its focus on economic justice and working-class values, clashes with Starmer's careful pragmatism. For Rayner, Labour should be bold and unapologetic in its fight for the underdog. But for Starmer, the priority is electability, and that means making compromises and appealing to a broader electorate. The tension between these two visions is what's really causing the rift within Labour, and it's not going away anytime soon. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.